Friday.
Proper
I'm sort of
Friday.
in holiday mode because yesterday was American Thanksgiving.
Should, give thanks for Popper. Don't forget to do that around the table.
Oh, yeah. I'm giving thanks, I have to say. So how did you find this one anyway? How did you find Popper 8?
So I looked at it because I have a busy week this week. A couple of concerts going on. So I looked at it and I kind of said, at the beginning of the week, and I said, that'll be fine. No bother. And then yesterday I was like, ooh, I mean, it's definitely very thummy, which we're no stranger to at this point in time. But I found this for the balance of I'm never too bothered about like bowing work as far as the actual string crossings and the loose wrist. I would always be thinking about that anyway, so that didn't bother me too much. I actually went back to the international version for this one. Would you believe?
Oh, cool. Interesting.
Because the international version basically has a bar to a bow everywhere, apart from maybe in 2 or 3 lines. And
Interesting.
I thought, just for myself, it would be more of a challenge to do it that way, rather than how the Baron writer works it out. So I just gave myself that challenge. Hilariously, I mean, we'll see how that works out. But what was interesting for me was actually more the left hand, the absolute tuning. You can tune it, and if you've a balanced hand, it's sort of in tune from the very, very beginning, but that's not really good enough. So there are plenty of things I would have done, like practice it in rhythms if I had time, which I did not. But just at the last minute, I did an awful lot of... I found your first finger, for the balance, you really have to be up and over. Where the balance lies for those double stops.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I'd say 5 minutes practice of that. And instantly my tuning just was so much more centered than it was when I was just, doing some poor choice practice, which was, the general playthrough to kind of see, will I be able to play this within the week?
Panic practice.
Not
helpful. I think those are fabulous points. I just kind of realized this morning, I was like, this one has a lot of thumb, but we've done a lot of them with a lot of thumb. So why does this one feel particularly tiring for the thumb? And I did realize it's because we talk all about thumb position, but there's not that many where we're literally playing on the thumb so often. And I noticed that definitely by the second page, I was like, wow, it's a lot of like actually needing to stop the string with the thumb. And I think your points about intonation are so valid, getting the really, really centered intonation on that. And I think going along with intonation, but also just your energy levels through this study, it's really about finding that really secure intonation without having to use everything you have to hold the string down.
Exactly.
And I think the only way to practice that is really slow practice, to be honest. But I just going along what you said about intonation, I was thinking this study has some really nice moments to explore how the quality of sound you're making also can affect the way we're hearing things. So it is, intonation. So I just thought these first 8 bars, it's such a nice progression, And already at bar 3, it starts exactly the same as the first bar, but we're kind of transitioning into minor. And I think just thinking about your sound, setting up these harmonic changes is really important. If it's perfectly in tune, great. But can you have it be in tune with the understanding? Because like a lot of times, I think in these studies, if you're not hearing the tonal progression of the thing, it can sound really. What was that? Yeah, I did do the Baron writer, so I had the easier time with the bow.
No, but I think it's a good exercise to do both, actually. So there's no harm in that. I always laugh about this, but can you? Can you actually? So there you can see I wasted way too much in the first. But if you can do 2 bars to a bow, that's a really quick way of getting back to being very comfortable in one.
Yeah.
So do take the time to practice the whole study in half the amount of bows. And even though, of course, it won't be as smooth as it should be, it means it gives you an extra little bit of depth when you need to use. I think this is the thing that we're not always using the arm for this. You have to use a little bit of the wrist and the fingers to change across your strings. So I definitely did. Let's say we go. So I'm trying to do the bow and open strings exactly where they happen. And I found it fascinating that the difficulty for me was not. Here it is.
Yeah.
That one little moment of fast string crossing movement where you almost have to play, you know, when you tune and you play your double stops in the morning, you play the 2 open strings. You need to be there and then just tip around it. So one level and one level, it's too much and too interfering. So really just see how little you can move off. You can even play a little bit of the other string to see how close you can get. And then just remove yourself to see how far does it have to go here, and you can watch yourself up here and see what is the angle. It's not actually as big as you think it should be.
I love that. And it's always, you know, I think as well, what you're saying, completely agree. It's always that third beat, isn't it? In these first several lines that have that. But I think, you know, approaching this study, like, can you analyze it? Can you look at it, you know, and look at this huge chunk of it and say, okay, well, I have this pattern happening every bar on the third beat. So, you know, once you kind of practiced it once, when you're working on other things in the study, you know, you having that awareness that it's always going to be on that third beat of each bar for the first 8 bars, you know, and that's how we do this in a week, right? It's like you look at it and you start seeing those patterns. I can't emphasize that enough, is, you know, taking that time out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think as we go on through the study, knowing that, say, for example, bar 13 is exactly the same again. So obviously we're playing the same material, but in a more uncomfortable area, actually, for the hand, which is quite funny. So it's not quite the same balance as up here is. You can see even just where your elbow has to be comparatively to where it is up a little bit higher. And the spacings are bigger. So you really have to roll a bit more. But what's really comforting is you're like, well, I've got this bow. I've already practiced that bow and open strings. Like, yeah, it's down a string. But realistically, once I kind of have the level right, then I'm good to go.
Yeah, totally. And there's also the added thing, just to add one more point to that part, is that you're going to need probably slightly more weight there, just being on the lower 2 strings.
Also,
so again,
the bow, actually, you know, I think
in the bow too.
I love that. Yeah, so to be aware that you do actually have to adapt as you go down to the lower strings to have such an equally good sound. Now, because it's forte, obviously that adds an extra little bit of juice to your bow hand. I kind of liked having a fluty, almost panpipey sound at the opening, personally, because it's quite nice and it's very little effort. So yeah, then suddenly we're getting big, right? What did you think of the middle? Whereabouts is it? You know, that kind of section, bar 9, and that appears twice. Yeah.
So I found how I thought about this. It's a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because it's a lot of half steps or semitones. It can feel really, really squished. But I think the key for this is just knowing that's what we always say, knowing exactly where your half steps and whole steps are. And when you shift, so for myself, when I shifted, shifting as a unit. So it follows a lot of patterns. When it comes back, it changes just slightly. I think there's one where it's a half step rather than a whole step shift.
Really?
But the very last one, I think it's the third beat of bar 35.
What I meant by the 2 similar places are bar 9 up to the end of 12, and then a similar passage happens bar 21, doesn't it? That's a similar kind of passage to the previous one. So that's what I meant. Yeah. No, absolutely. The last one is just a tiny bit different, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's good to notice these things. Again, like you save yourself so much time when you're just aware of what's happening pattern-wise.
Definitely, I thought it was very interesting for me to decide I was going to shift on my first finger a full tone, here a semitone, tone, so I'm going from D sharp, C sharp. And being aware that you do have to slightly adapt, then you have to, because we're getting towards that middle area, it does have to be a slightly bigger spacing with your thumb, so you can't just stay in comfy land, which around here, it's all pretty similar, you know, but as we get back, there's just that area in my cello anyway that gets substantially bigger faster, you know.
Oh yeah. I think one danger too of this passage is that even I noticed this in my practice, even though I'd sort of figured out what's happening, there's really a temptation to always stop where the songs are. You know. And even though
that's 1 week itis, because if we had 2 or 3 weeks to think about these things, then of course you'd have it practiced in. But I mean, who needs 2-3 weeks when you can have one, right?
I know. I know.
I like it.
What else? Oh, I have a question. Does the bar 27, does the international edition, or is it bar 27? No, bar 25. Does it do this fingering? So you do it.
No, it doesn't. So,
I knew it.
Yeah. So I actually just thought that was like hilarious. I mean, some people love doing that in the Debussy as well, don't they? I mean, that's what they want to do, but then some people actually do that, like, for the resonance, but, you know, it's kind of hilarious. Like, where are you really going?
To be honest, I personally wouldn't choose that, but I was laughing as I learned it, because I was like, I bet this is not in the other edition.
Yeah.
But it's a very personalized thing. What did they do, though? Just out of curiosity.
I kind of liked it. It was then thumb. So it kind of felt quite comfy, actually, because you had plenty of time to get your thumb up as you're shifting. Now, it's still unusual. There are plenty of places in this study that I thought, I'd probably play that in first position, actually. So
and enjoy the string class.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love that. Yeah, that's an interesting passage. And then, of course, when we're here, we really need to save here. So you have time to actually, at the end of the bow, have this. You know, you want to have that A to ring out, and often I found in my practice I wasted too much bow at the beginning of just that, you know, just there, because I was shifting. So a little bit of healthy, concise practice there I think would be helpful.
Yeah, it's also one of those juicy moments where you're just like, diminish chord! And you have to not go too crazy.
I mean, I love a good bit of crazy. After you play that harmonic, that second finger placement is quite tricky for tuning, isn't it? To go from the harmonic to suddenly low and also have the right spacing. So just practicing that change would be very good. Because it kind of is down, it almost, sometimes you can be in danger of going too flat, because you're also going down in this diagonal direction, which is unusual. So just that little corner. And then I think when we're here, again, I would have taught in minor thirds shifting. So that we always know. And the difference between just thinking that's a tone stretch in between. I mean, you have a different way of verbalizing that, but just once everyone has figured out which is similar. And here I had to bring my thumb back much further when I got to that area, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Than I would have had to previously, because obviously it's a major there rather than the previous minor that we had from the... And then we've got... So it's also getting bigger, but it's minor to major, but also bigger in the area. So there's a lot to think about in that passage, right?
Yeah. And I think one other thing too that makes that passage tricky is the placement of the first finger on the D string, right? Because it's you'd usually expect that to be a fourth below where the thumb is, but it's actually half step higher than that. And I think particularly the moment you said where you're shifting back to the F, I found that that's a lot wider than what you're expecting.
Absolutely,
But
it's very interesting. And then actually that next bar at 30, I found that particularly challenging for really keeping the balance of that thumb in the right place. You know, there's a lot going on, a lot of shifts in a quick succession of timing. So, and even continuing up. So where you end up, I found I had to really have that thumb ready earlier than where I would have done it naturally sight reading it.
Yeah.
Totally. I felt like I just had to move up a little bit earlier. And every finger like that. Move first. Move second. So you actually do have time to get prepared early in that, and that's just a tricky little place, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, it's a lot of quick succession harmonies, isn't it? As well.
Absolutely.
You know, sometimes we stay in the same sort of harmonic world for 4 bars, and then other times. I mean, actually, just saying that really quickly, about areas where we're in. I mean, even if there's not a lot of movement, like the first 2 bars. I feel like it's a totally different experience to play the first bar as the second bar because just the bow direction, you know? And it goes back to the whole thing we say of it's not, you can practice it, you know, on the wrong bowing, but it's just a different thing. So this is one of those rare instances where we get to practice it both directions.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Popper, for thinking about this. Yeah. So now we don't actually have to start with an up bow just to change it all up and get all of the technique we want.
Very thorough. Very thorough.
I like it. So yeah, that pretty much covers it, doesn't it? I mean, the end, I suppose, is pretty similar. Bar 34 and 35 is a similar type of thing. Just knowing where you're. It's funny. I actually wrote in a whole pile of semitones. And really, if I had just written a bracket over the tones, it would have only been about 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's what I did actually. Yeah.
Just the tones. I'm going to show you this for the laugh.
Oh yeah, let's see.
I literally wrote nothing else.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of info.
Like, literally, it's really funny because actually I don't use any of it. Now I only look at where I haven't written something. But I started with semitones, so, or, you know, what do you call it?
It's part of the process, isn't it, though? You know, that's the fascinating thing about learning.
Efficiency of what you write down. But there's literally nothing written on my first page, so it's quite funny. It's like I did all my efforts in that one page. And then just the very last line, again, saving the bow at the beginning, because often you can get to the last chromatic G, F sharp, what is it? And there you still need to be able to sing that, you know, and again, with the string crossings at the very end, trying to not, you know, try not to give an actual nudge to an open string, which is another thing we have to think about the whole way through, is not putting any unintended accents.
Yeah, and I think everything you said was so good, the way you explained it about finding the balance between the strings, you know, almost like a double stop. Because I think people would tend, and I'm guilty of this, would tend to just look at something like that and be like, oh, string crossings are difficult, and sort of muscle their way through in a way where they just go, and they're not that efficient, but you've repeated it enough times that you have some control. But I think it's really a missed opportunity if you don't practice the way you said, because there's so much more elegance, and it's nicer to look at. I'm not obsessed with that, but if you're flapping around, it just, first of all, it's a massive waste of energy.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Even if you're at the end.
But if you're playing a concerto, you have to find places that you can conserve your energy. And if there's a passage like this in a concerto where you're doing an accompanying feature, you don't want to be flapping around, because you literally need your energy for the big, massive moments that you need all of your energy. So this is kind of why we practice these things, so that we can go, okay, here I can relax a bit more, use just a tiny bit less of my energy.
Mind over matter, brain power. Use that intelligence. Cool.
I love it.
Is it time? Woo.
Amazing. Beautiful. Gorgeous spots. Absolutely lovely. It's really pretty, isn't it? I'm very jealous of the shortened bows. I should have done that version.
It does give you some freedom, but you get a special gold star for the harder bowing.
Why, thank you. I shall take it and stick it on.
Brava! Gorgeous.
Well,
stunning.
Lovely. Thank you.
Oh man, I'm impressed with your long bows that I am not doing for this whole thing. Gorgeous.
Thank you.
What a way to start a Friday.
Go us. Woohoo.
Go us. Woohoo. Super well done.
You too.